Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the July edition of Molten Music Monthly. So as the planet burns, what better way to celebrate our demise than to turn on a few more bits of gear, plug in a few more musical, extraordinary machines and start thinking about making our swan song of music. So coming up in our pre-apocalyptic Molten Monthly, we have Gforce dust off a load of old M-Tron tapes. Isla Instruments packs every synth into Caladan. Behringer introduces the most aesthetically challenged synth yet. Korg immerses you in a virtual reality gadget. Crumar Spirit comes back from the dead. Cherry Audio authentically strangles a cat. Zlosynth assimilates magnetic hysteresis. I'm not sure that's right. Destiny Plus wants to entangle us in complex effects. Error Instruments gets granular. Gstorm nails the SH101 oscillator. System 80 nails the Roland synth voice. Reco-Synth goes pro with Mutuca. Artiphon unrolls the Orba. Neutral Labs massively upgrades Elmyra. EMW quantizes the Turing machine. xVOX pulls chords out of your modular. And Jasmine and olive trees are exactly what we need. There's something extraordinarily soulful about a mellotron. There just is. As unwieldy and crazy and bonkers as they are, I mean, this fantastic idea of making sounds by running tape across tape heads in response to playing a key on a keyboard. It's just the most extraordinary idea. I love these kinds of analog, real chewy machine ideas that just flourish into this sound, into this idea of music making that takes from here and takes from there and inspires everything down to what we have now. The mellotron seems to sit there as the birthplace of so much of electronic music, so much innovation and inventiveness that brings us to this point. I get quite excited just talking about it. Anyway, Gforce are the masters behind the software emulation of the mellotron in their M-Tron plugin, virtual instrument thingy, and it's superb. They've got a new version 4, is it? Version 4, I think, version 6. Oh, I don't know. Does it matter? Really, all they've done is they've taken this fantastic emulation that they've got and they've expanded it and given you more of a synthesizer interface to it, expanded the library, given you a few more gizmos and bits and pieces, and generally knocked it about so more things fall off as you play it. It's the authentic experience of using a ridiculous machine in a studio environment. But really, I guess all the magic comes in recapturing those original tapes. And they've gone far beyond that now. You can get all sorts of a library, and is using the M-Tron way of doing things, but is absolutely brand new and pretty awesome library. I mean, who doesn't want to have Alex Ball going, "Ah," in your studio all the time? I mean, people would pay good money for that. So I find that with the M-Tron, it is like having a sampler, because that is the experience that you're getting, even though evidently it's not that is how it feels. That's how it feels to use. It feels like I'm using sampled instruments, and they're the sort of sounds that I would seek out in any sampler. You have this gorgeous, thick, kind of chewy sense that there's something real going on here. Well, obviously there isn't. But it's that sense, it's that perception, it's that feel that every pad, every sound, every rhythm, every weirdness, every squeak is going to be contributing something to your sound. Now, there are people who are massively into their mellotrons. I'm not. I just enjoy it. I mean, from the moment that you load it up and it gives you that flute sound from Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, you just go, yeah. This is it. It has that wobble. It has that vibe that you know that you are entering into another realm. So that's how I see it. Anyway, I mean, it's just a plug-in, right? But it just comes with this extraordinary library of sounds that's it just emotes, and it's evocative, and it just takes you to another place. It's a marvelous, wonderful thing, and it's a joy to play. Now, Isla Instruments are working on what could be described as a dream polyphonic synthesizer. It's a hybrid that pulls together synthesizers from all sorts of places, where essentially you have a card with a synth on it and you plug that in the back and route it through this system. It was an idea conceived really by somebody else, by Future Sonus and their Parva synthesizer, which was around a few years ago, that it just never seemed to completely get off the ground. It was a great idea. There's this box with this matrix style interface on the front with these different systems within it that you would blend and use together. I mean, previously, Isla Instruments up till now have been working on their SP2400, their sampler, authentic remodeling of a classic sampler, and now they've turned their attention to this synthesizer. They're calling it Caladan, which is interesting. It's going to have this very visual, very colourful interface. It's still in kind of prototype stage, but they've been showing different things. In fact, oddly, they were showing this interface that they had, this idea for these haloed knobs, before the Caladan had even been sort of poked at. So it's like they've had some ideas and they're pulling them all together and they're stuffing them in this one synthesizer. Interesting. I mean, they do the work. They work bloody hard to get things right. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what it is that they come up with and how many synths you can get inside. Exactly which synths do you get inside? How does all that work? Is kind of what I want to know. I mean, the original Parva was an analog 3-oscillator 8-voice synthesizer, whereas Isla seemed to be pushing this concept out into include all sorts of different voice cards from different synthesizers. Exactly how analog/digital it's going to be is difficult to say. Evidently there's a digital front end, but how much of the circuitry behind that is going to be pure analog, I don't know. But it's an interesting development. And I imagine they're going to be mixing analog synthesizers with digital synthesizers to produce this kind of Uber platform for whatever you like. Is it whatever you like synthesizer? Now, Behringer continues to dazzle us with these pug ugly synthesizers. What are they doing? Why hasn't somebody in their design department been fired yet? That's what I don't understand. But hey, it's a look. I suppose it's a look, and who am I? Who am I to criticise the design aspirations of a massive global company like Music Tribe? They obviously know what they're doing because they sell a lot of stuff. So there it is. But anyway, the latest assault on your senses is the BX700. So can you take it from the name as what that may be? BX, it's got this strange greenness about it. Oh, it's just awful. But hey, it could sound fantastic. I mean, we're still yet to see any of these mini synths that they've been talking about for the last few years. None of them have actually made it into the real world, as far as I can tell. And so we don't really know what it's like to hold in the hand. I mean, it's a bit like Volcas are difficult to know until you've got one in your hand to know exactly how actually quite cool and groovy they are. And we may find that with these latest Behringer bits and pieces. But the BX700, is it like a DX7 with a CS80 filter? Is that what I heard it is? I don't know. Apparently it's a bit more like a DX200. What was a DX200? I don't even remember that one. It has a CS80 inspired filter and also a drum machine built in. Fantastic, I suppose. I mean, great. An awesome combination of things in just a very ugly presentation. But hey, other things are better. Their Polysource is looking pretty tasty, I have to say. The Pro 800, of course, is out there, which seems to be riddled with all sorts of weird firmware problems. The Behringer Facebook groups are just packed full of people going, oh, it doesn't do this and doesn't do that, and this bit doesn't seem to work. This is a bit rubbish, and I've got a big list of things I'd like you to change about it. I think perhaps Behringer needs to spend more time soaking in what it is they're sent to do. And although, I mean, that's not their vibe. Their vibe is get the bloody thing out there, let everybody have it, and then we'll deal with the problems afterwards. Well, hopefully. I mean, they're not awesome at that necessarily, but that's the idea, I think, is that you make your first 10,000 customers kind of beta testers of the thing, because they are fanatics and very much into their synthesizers and will take delight in pointing out every single flaw or thing that they don't feel is as authentic as it should be, even though they've only spent £2.50 on the synthesizer. But hey, we live in strange times, and that's okay. I mean, by all accounts, it sounds phenomenal, as all their synths do. No problem with any of that at all. The other thing we saw, which I think is new, I mean, there's been plenty. They've been posting all sorts of stuff. I mean, one funny thing they did is they did this little skit I suppose you'd call it, where they went on Facebook and they sort of made this idea up of this bloke sitting in an office going, oh, I want to go home, he posted on Facebook. But they won't let me because they want me to post news about a couple of little things. And then there was this little story about, oh yeah, this designer just come up to me and says, oh, please, will you tell the Facebook crew about all this? And he said, oh, all right. So he showed us some, I don't know, some synth. It might have been this. It might have been the BQ10, the take on the Korg SQ10. You know, one of those. Was it one of those, or was it doesn't really matter what it was. It was just another product. And he says, oh, I've still got to stay behind because there's a couple more things I've got to tell you about. Very excited. And then, you know, they kept this story going about, you know, I'm sitting here, I'm on my third coffee, and I've really got to tell you about this because they tell me I can't go home until I've got all these things out. And so they put out another synthesizer thing, another reveal of something else. I think it might have been their Buckler clone, who knows, all of these marvellous synths coming out. And, you know, following the story along and going, well, that's quite interesting, this poor bloke having to go through all this trauma to try to tell us about these synths. How fascinating. But then, 3 days later, the same story started appearing on Twitter. And it was the same. As in the bloke saying, oh, I'm stuck here at night, right, I can't go home yet until, and then this bloke comes in, and it was like, oh, you've just ruined it. You had a decent skit going that was believable. We would have gone with it. We would have rolled with it. You know, it sounded quite fun and exciting, and now you've ruined it by doing exactly the same thing 3 days later, proving that the whole thing was just a setup, which just undermines your marketing. It undermines the, you have this remarkable ability to build warmth towards yourself and then piss it all away. I don't know. Why can't you just do the nice stuff? Just be nice. Don't mess it up. Anyway, so more stuff coming from Behringer, of course, which is going to be awesome. They're taking over the world of synthesizers, blah, blah, blah. And that's great. It's great to have good value synthesizers out there, as it is also great to have stuff that's expensive and instrument based and has user interfaces that are designed to be interesting and usable and extraordinary. You know, we have room in our industry for all of these things. I don't begrudge anyone buying a Behringer synth or a massive Moog synth. Are Moog owned by Behringer? No, they're not. That was something else. No, never mind. Forget that. You know, it's all good. It's all good, and we all get good stuff, which is great. It's great. Keep it coming. Now, Korg has released their Gadget software, which is a bunch of little synthesizers and drum machines that they've had on iOS for a long time, and Mac OS hasn't quite annoyingly made it onto Windows, but it has just been released in virtual reality. So it's available on Windows through Steam or through Oculus, and you run it on your Meta Visual thing. I'll demonstrate it for you in a minute. So you have this thing, and what it gives you is this circle around you of these little synths and drum machines. I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, the quality of the visuals is excellent, other than the fact it suffers from, can I ever get anything in focus in this bloody headset? But it's there, and you have synths, and you point at them, and then you use a joystick to move parameters, and then you sequence them. Drum machines, I either do it in really fudgy real time by trying to select different notes, or you can do it in step edit mode, and you create patterns, and you mix it, and you mute stuff, and you go to town, and you have a fabulous time. And sound quality is excellent. Accessibility and usability of those synthesizers is like the hardest thing you will ever do. You're trying to point. I'm trying to point this. I'm pointing this at a button. Which button do I press to make? Okay, I've activated the button. I know I've got to move this one in order to move that up, that down, and now I need to move on to the next. I need to move on to the. How do I move? Yeah, next thing. Try to move that up and down. It's wow. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've had an Oculus 2 for quite a while. I enjoy it. Small doses. I think it's a fabulous technology. It's a lot of fun for the right sort of games and bits and pieces. But for any serious, delicate work, it is just impossible. You get frustrated. You start feeling sick. Get disorientated. It's hot. Your arms ache. You know, there's very, very little actually going for it in that kind of environment. I mean, I know all the big tech companies want us to go full-time into virtual reality so that we can be part of our office and have meetings and live in a virtual world, but it hurts too much. So I just don't see it as being a really cool thing. However, the implementation of Gadget in VR is fantastic. I might do a video on it. I might have tried to do a video on Sonic State, a bit of a stream on Sonic State, which I'm on later on this afternoon. But I probably won't have finished this video by the time that happens. But I'm going to attempt to do a demo of it there, which will be exciting. So I also need to go away and do a bit of practice so I don't look like a complete idiot. But the sound quality is great. The idea is fantastic. It's just trying to deal with a virtual world and small controls that you're trying to be, particular about is difficult, I would say. Difficult. But hey, I mean, it's 20 quid. It'll keep you amused for a good long while. Gives you something to play with. It's undoubtedly the best music making thing on virtual reality currently. I mean, obviously, Logic is going to appear in the Apple thing if you've got $3,000 to spare. You know, that's fine. I'm sure that will beat it all. But at the moment, it's the best you're going to get. It's pretty good. Pretty good. The Crumar Spirit is rumoured to be back. Now, Crumar is an Italian company who made synthesizers many moons ago and still makes sort of organs and bits and pieces in that sort of arena, although they are also experimenting very hard with digital technology, digital synthesis, other bits and pieces, Raspberry Pi stuff they've got on the back burner. So there's rumour, though, that they are going to bring the Spirit back. Now, the Spirit was a monophonic synthesizer that was pretty damn awesome, but it was released just at the wrong time. It was released sort of mid-80s when everyone was going, oh, digital, oh, look, digital, I don't have to tune anything ever again. Isn't that fantastic? And so everyone was steaming over that way, and so, an analog monosynth just was not the thing to have at that time. So it flopped, which is a shame because it had like a couple of filters inside. It had all sorts of lovely, quite advanced analog technology and routing and modulation that actually these days we would love to have. We would fall over ourselves to have it. It was also, as it happens, designed by Bob Moog and his whole team. So it has all of that experience and thought and stuff gone into it. So it is in many ways they were taking the Mini Moog and just pushing the possibilities of that into other places. And it probably was something quite phenomenal. It just did not hit at the right time, which is sad. Anyway, so we've heard that Crumar are going to give it another go. I think they should. I think that could be a great little synthesizer, great little project. Cherry Audio have found another old synthesizer in the back of a cupboard somewhere that they thought they'd better emulate. This one is the Octave Cat. People say the Octave Cat was a bit like the ARP Odyssey. In fact, there was rumours that ARP sued them for copying the Odyssey, but in fact that wasn't the case. But they were sued for something to do with the keyboard, the duophonic mode on the keyboard. But anyway, the Octave Cat kind of attacked the market that the Odyssey and the Mini Moog were all sort of had all sewn up, and did it at a much, much cheaper price. Never looked as good, but hey, it gave you a phenomenal sort of punky, edgy, aggressive sound. So Cherry Audio have modelled it in its entirety, and of course pushed it out into 16-note polyphony, added MIDI, patch saving, all that sort of lovely stuff you can do with software, and are giving us an opportunity to relive the sound of that thing. The Octave Cat. I have no idea what it sounds like. I've never heard it. In fact, it might well be playing in the background right now, and I wouldn't have a clue. But Cherry Audio always do a really great job of capturing the vibe of these old synthesizers they've been meddling with, and so this, I imagine, is no exception. Zlosynth Instruments, the Kaseta, nice name, to something which is going to give you saturated tape delay. It's an interesting little module because it's not little, it's really wide. It has these 4 sliders on it which really invite you into the idea that I'm manipulating delay lines, which is kind of what you are. It's giving you a tape vibe. It's not trying to be a simple, digital emulation of tape delay where you just have a couple of knobs and you're changing times as it's moving about. It's really inviting you to play with the position of those tape heads, which is interesting. Something that boggles my mind, proper tape delays. Never can quite wrap my head around exactly how that journey from tape to sound is working, how the difference between the distance between the tape heads and the time and the speed and it's like, ooh, it's magical somehow in how all of it translate, because we're very used to a delay just being an echo, and it's different to that. It's more interesting than that. Now all this business about simulating magnetic heteroteresis, yeah, I don't know what that means either, but it's apparently some way to provide the warm saturation. So I guess my stabbing in the dark is that it's emulating what happens on tape, rather than just adding a circuit which drives stuff. It's trying to emulate that, what actually happens in that magnetic process that creates this saturation that we like so much in tape. And then you've got these 4 delay lines which you can use with different amounts of feedback to sculpt exactly where you want this sound to go. You can actually record directly onto it for up to 5 minutes. I mean, that kind of transforms it into something else entirely. I don't know, I'm finding this one particularly fascinating. I haven't gone to any depth in researching the demos or anything. It's just the ideas and talking about it and the sense of what's going on in there, I think, is quite fascinating. I mean, it also wows and flutters. It's got an internal oscillator for a bit of modulation. It can also create trigger sequences or something, I don't know, but it's playing with the possibilities and the landing of those delays and the way that tape's going around that I find fascinating. And I'm speaking as a person who never got on with magneto. I could not work that flipping module out. It would fox me. I would just sometimes have to dials up something randomly and it would be beautiful, and then I'd have no idea how any of that happened. Whereas this looks like the sort of thing that I could feel like I was doing something more intentional, and that appeals. Now, Destiny Plus brought us that strange Krasowski Cells synthesizer. I talked about that last month, I believe. Whereas now they've got something else. They've obviously been working very, very hard. This is called Entanglement, or Entanglement Space, which is a great name. I like this a great deal. It's this big slab of complicated, interconnected effects processing. So it's like a madly modulated multi-effects processor, but where everything is laid out. You've got 4, I think, 4 of them, interconnected, intermodulated, patchable, which gives you this adventure, this journey to take to route your signals in and out of this place, which is then going to turn them inside out. It's going to reverberate them, delay them, and mess the whole thing about. It comes with 16 algorithms in total, so algorithms being different effects, I suppose, that you can run on each one, and then each one has a bunch of parameters, and you've got a dozen internal modulators that then feed out into all of that. So, you can stick just like a single twang in and just get it to go into its own universe. I mean, it sounds very, very exciting. I mean, it's the sort of thing, as I keep banging on about, this sort of thing Moog should have done ages ago. We need a nice, big desktop multi-effects unit, which isn't like a guitar multi-effects where you have to choose between different things, but you can run a choice of different things together, interspersed with modulation, interspersed with different patching in and out. Take your feedback out, run that through something, bring that back in. It needs to have effects exploding out of itself, and this is absolutely what it does. Entanglement Space. Glorious. Era Instruments are continuing their dalliance with, this is not rocket science, with the Brinta granular sampler, I suppose you say. Brinta apparently is some kind of breakfast you have when you're in Amsterdam. I don't know. But this module is got this nice big center knob with this halo of glowy stuff around it, which shows you the position that you are within your sample. So sample in, and then you granulate yourself around it. So you've got grains coming off, you've got all sorts of lovely scrubbiness and interest and fruitiness and other nuisances coming off it as you scale and find your way through these avenues of little tiny incy bits of audio. You get up to 3.5 seconds of recording time around this thing, and then you can spin it about once you have your recording and do what the heck you like with it. It could be a tape loop, it could act like, as I say, the shimmering shifting of grains through a granular sample engine. You can scrub it, you can pitch shift it, you can do all sorts of interesting things with it. And because it's Aero Instruments, it's going to be a bit wild, a bit noisy. Because this is not rocket science, it's going to be beautifully engineered. So these two worlds coming together, I think, is an extraordinary thing. They have this other one as well coming along soon called Bubbles, but I don't have a great deal of information on it. I think it's a filter. But I'm going to keep my eye on that one, I think. And just a shout out for Gstorm Electro, really. He keeps banging out these bits and pieces, and these are a great little take on the SH101 VCO. He's already done this with the version 1, but this time around he's revealed all of the waveform outputs so you can play with those, improve the tuning, sized it down a little bit, and just made it that little tweaky bit more beautiful. So these are the 101 VCOs available in blue, red, and some other colour. Black, is it? Possibly, but what you get is essentially the oscillator engine from the SH101. So with all the controls, so you've got the waveform mixer with the subs, the noise you can blend in as well. You've got pulse width modulation, tuning knobs rather than sliders this time, and so all in all, just a very well balanced and awesome looking SH101 oscillator for your Eurorack. Talking of Roland voices in Eurorack, System 80 have updated their 810, which is a Roland synth voice. It's essentially like a single Juno voice, Jupiter voice maybe, that kind of thing, that kind of vibe. System 80 really nails down that whole Roland feel, that analog Rolandness that we wish was still something that Roland did, but don't. And so other people do. System 80 does it beautifully. And this combines a VCO, a VCF and a VCA in one lovely looking black and orange package. Fantastic. Yeah, just fantastic. Bit of normalization behind the back so you can just run it as a synthesizer voice, or you can pull everything out and run each of those modules independently. So if you're looking for a Roland sound in your Eurorack, then this is pretty much it. Because you know of my love of the Joe filter. I'm always banging on about it. It's just a fantastic Roland sounding, that liquid, there's something about the warmth, that Juno-ness, the Jupiter-ness, whatever it is that they pour into these things. It's a beautiful, beautiful, soulful kind of sound. And that is absolutely dripping out of this 810 Mark II. A Reco-Synth is hanging in there. Now Arthur Jolly has kind of put Reco-Synth on the back burner. He's kind of felt that he came to a situation where he couldn't really make enough of these by hand to meet the demand, which is an awesome thing, but there wasn't quite enough for him to start a factory or to employ people to do it. So he kind of stuck in that, this is going really well, but it's not quite well enough to actually put food on my table. Which is a shame. But the other side of that is that Arthur really wants to focus on his music, like we all do. And he was finding that every moment of every day was taken up putting together synthesizers, when actually he wanted to be using his extraordinary studio, his extraordinary collection of old analog bits and pieces, actually making music. And I can tell you, I mean, I've got his album. He gave me his album when I saw him at a Superbooth, and it's superb. It's just great. It's just filled with the most warmth and classic, vintage, and yet not dated sound that I've heard in a long time. It's a fantastic listen. You should go and seek that out. So yeah, it's well worth pursuing, I would say. Why can't you do everything? Just do everything. Everything. You need 3 or 4 lifetimes in order to achieve all of the things that we could possibly do. But anyway, I digress. What Arthur is doing is building synths to order, and every now and again he comes up with something awesome like the Mutuca Pro. The Mutuca is a little monosynth that he's done a few different versions of over the years, and this is an expanded version that's now pushed it into 3 oscillators. So in some ways it's the mini Moog. It's the mini Moog of Reco-Synth. And it gives you 3 oscillators, 2 of which are purely melodic. The third one can be a modulator, although of course they can all modulate each other. But that's the general idea. It's got a fabulous filter with its own envelope, and then another envelope. It's got a VCA. It's then got some extra special bits, like a big fat Russian vacuum tube in there to add a little bit of warmth. It's got a stomp box effects loop, so you can loop out through your pedals and back in. It's then got a mixer where you can mix in the saturation, mix in the loop pedals, and mix in the clean signal all together, which is pretty awesome. And then round it all off is a digital sequencer, which is very interesting, which is very unusual for Reco-Synth, I think. And that allows you to create patterns and randomization. It's got this interesting density knob, so when you put your step pattern in, you can then turn down the density and it starts dropping notes out to give you these interesting variations. So yeah, nice. And of course, it looks fantastic. I mean, what is that blue? I love that weird, it's sort of like a petrol blue, but it's not a petrol blue. That blue and kind of orange red, the arcade buttons, it's just it's an awesome thing. I wish it was in the UK. I wish it wasn't so far away in Brazil, so that I could, well, first of all, go around and have a cup of tea. That'd be nice, and play on his gear, but also just have better access to what he's doing. But if you like what he does and you have a bit of cash to spare, then go and talk to him about him building you a fantastic analog synthesizer. I think that would be awesome. At the other end of the synthesizer sort of spectrum is the Artiphon Chorda. Now, Artiphon made a big splash with the Orba a while ago, probably a little while ago now, which was this ball. It was a ball that had been sliced with some pads on it, and you could be out and about, being really cool on the streets, being sort of urban and that, and tapping on this thing and making beats. Got your headphones on. You could probably shake it and that would do something. And of course, in certain places of the music industry, that's an awesome thing, and people lapped it up, and you can connect it to an app and to your phone, load different sounds, and you've got bass and drums and lead and stuff all going on this grapefruit thing that you're tapping away at. So as you see, I don't know that it's really for me, but hey, I mean, I quite like the one that you bounce. I like the bouncy ball one, but this isn't that. You would break it if you did that. But anyway, what Artiphon have decided to do is to roll it out into a flat kind of guitar neck style one. Now, they did originally, when they first popped up, do something very similar, which was a MIDI controller. But this is kind of that reworked into a self-contained synthesizer music making studio, with which you can go out there into the park. It's got a little speaker plugged in, and you can hold on to this thing and slap it about, and it will generate sound, and people will think you're awesome in the park. So there's that. It does have a fretboard. It has 12 notes, I guess, in which you can allocate scales and play stuff. You can stick in drums and things, and just do your best to not look kind of ridiculous. Oh, it's just on that, I don't know. I mean, you get a lot of these sorts of controllers that crop up from time to time, which are either guitar neck based or something approaching that, and it's really hard for them not to look silly. I mean, guitars in themselves tend to look a bit silly unless you really own it. If you can embody the idea that you have this thing around your neck and you are playing it with your whole soul, then I think you can get away with it. With this, cool, I don't know, only maybe just. I mean, the promotional video they did I thought was outstanding. I thought it really did sort of hook into the weird quirkiness of it, that this is a bit kind of weird and silly, but heck, it's good fun to play with, and I'm producing these tones, and it's simple and it's small and it's straightforward, and I can stick it in my backpack, and all of those sorts of things. So it has a lot of stuff going for it, I suppose. So I just thought I'd bring it to you and say, hey, there's this thing, It's a MIDI controller. You wang stuff about with it. You can play things on it. Could be cool. I don't know. Could be. Neutral Labs is this fantastic guy who sends me stuff that I have a play with. Mostly kits, and I really, really enjoy them. I've got one. Just going to read. Things like this, the normal, fantastic. Look at this mouth thing. It gets all growly. Awesome. One of the best things was this up here, which is the Elmyra. Now this one it really felt like it was a challenge to the Lyra 8, the Soma Labs thing. So it's kind of like a noise box of drones that you get your fingers involved in, and it starts generating like crazy sounds. I did a build of this and a video of this. Go and check it out. There's now a Mark II. Oh yes, Mark II. I've got it here. It's still in the box because I haven't built it yet. It's only just arrived, but I have to say, it's looking pretty exciting, pretty. So I get the front panel out without scratching it. Look at this thing. Now there's just so much more on this than there ever was on the Mark I. I mean, heck, look at the state of this. So what do you get in addition? You still get your 4 oscillators, your 4 droning oscillators, so it can still do that. But you've got delay, you've got a low pass filter, you've got essentially this, the normal, built into it. You've also got space for the weird upgrade cards you can stick in. I've got a Scrat, I think it's a Scrat filter, which I've still yet to build. But that takes these little cards where you put components on it, and that changes the nature of the resonance, and it adds a little bit to the circuit. It lets you mod and hack away at it, and you can do that here too. It's got a whole bunch of modulation in it. It also has a better sequencer, I believe, and it will also accept tuneful things. So not only is it just going to drone and make weird noises, you could actually play it. You could plug in a sequence or use the sequencers in here and apply 1 volt per octave control to it, and all sorts of things could happen. But obviously I haven't built it yet, so I can't really tell you that much more about it. But it's a very exciting box, I think. It looks fantastic. I love the idea of this and how exciting that's going to possibly be. Is that? Yeah, I think mine came with a box, but you can also load it in as a Eurorack module. So that's Elmyra 2, coming soon. The T-Sequencer from EMW I thought was a really nice idea. I mean, I've got a Turing machine. Turing machine is a module for music thing, modular, which just generates these frankly awesome melodies. It creates voltage in a just an extraordinarily helpful and useful way, and you can push it in range, you can push it in craziness, you can lock in a single loop as it goes round. But the one thing it was always missing was that it was only generating voltage. There was no scaling or quantizing to that voltage, so inevitably you'd use it with a quantizer. So EMW thought, hey, why don't we make a Turing machine with a quantizer? Well, they probably didn't think that. They probably thought, let's make an interesting Turing machine, which is what they did. And one of the features that's in it is the fact that it has a quantizer in it. Am I getting there? It has other stuff too. You know, there's some other features. There's a regeneration trigger button. There's octave selection. They've got forward and reverse and some extra CV control. But ultimately, I think the thing that wins with this, if you're thinking of buying a Turing machine, is to go, am I always going to be quantizing it? In which case, well, I would get this one. I mean, I might get this one anyway, because, you know, having a couple of Turing machines is a good idea, rather than just having the one. So, yeah, nice. Like the idea, absolutely, it's a winner. The xVOX Harmonic Pitch Shifter is a really curious, interesting, fascinating idea that I don't fully grasp, but I really, really like it. So this is, actually it's not that much different. What it is, it's massively different, right, from the Western audio harmonic something or other I talked about the other week. And that took in an oscillator and then had 2 oscillators inside, which it used pitch detection in order to then run chords with those other 2 oscillators. So it was generating in that way. This does things differently. Similar idea, but instead of generating through oscillation, it takes that original signal and then pitch shifts it. Pitch shifts it a number of times in order to create chords that way, which is really interesting. The bit that confuses me slightly is I'm not quite sure whether the incoming audio, whether the pitch of that is even remotely relevant, or whether you just need a drone going in and then the module itself does all the magic in the pitch shifting and quantizing and creating all these chords. Because that appears to be the case, but there must be something else. There must be something else going on. But essentially it has 4 channels of this pitch shifting going on that you can assign to different things and morph through different chords and structures and intervals and modulations and bits and pieces. So you can essentially generate whole chord progressions within the module. I mean, I think there's a lot more to it than I'm really giving it, but in a nutshell, it's a 4-channel pitch shifter for whatever you put in. And I think there's some awesome power in here somewhere for generating chords which are going to be integral to your Eurorack. Because it's all CVable, it's all modulatable, it's all changeable from within your system, as opposed to being like MIDI or some other sort of digital cleverness. I mean, I'm not saying it's not digital, I'm just saying that it presents itself in a very analog way that fits nicely into modular. And I think that is what potentially makes this very interesting. So finishing off our roundup, we have this extraordinary, beautiful thing from Jasmine and Olive Trees, which is a beautiful name in the first instance for what looks like quite an interesting and beautiful module. The module's called Traffic, and it's 3 channels of voltage generation that can be controlled or triggered via triggers, I suppose. So I guess it's what it's looking to do is to be a preset device. So it's a way of storing voltage which you can then send to something. So imagine the scenario, you've got something like the Bacillus arteritus alter, or the wobbler, or the zaps, something that can make different sounds as you change the parameters on it. So for instance, a percussive sound, you might be able to get a kick drum and a snare drum out of the same thing, but in order to do that you need to move certain knobs around the place in order to find that different sound. So with something like the Traffic, you can set up 3 lots of voltage and then fire that into the module so that every time it triggers, it's triggering on the right sound. So it combines, so what you would do, you would feed your drum patterns into it. That would be doing the triggering and the changing of the voltage at the same time. And that's the clever thing, I think. And you've got 3 channels of it routing into a single output, which then changes that one parameter on the module, which makes all the difference. But you've also got 3 lots of that. So you don't have to just change one parameter, you can change up to 3 parameters with different lots of voltage. So you can imagine of it running between your drum machine, your drum sequencer, your trigger sequencer, and your drum module, and it will do all the changes on the fly, on the way. Brilliant. Brilliant. Really, really, really nice. It also has an alternative firmware, which turns it into an 8-step sequencer with 3 phase shifted outputs, which I guess means you've got your 8 steps coming out of here, starting on 1, 8 steps out of here, starting on 3, 8 steps out of here, starting on 5, or something. I don't know. It didn't go into a whole lot of detail on the website, but I think that's the general idea. And that's also really interesting. So 2 interesting things in one module. There's also an expansion for it to give you some manual buttons and a few more gate to trigger type interactions. But otherwise, as it is, it's a really interesting, useful little device that could definitely revolutionize the way that you're able to generate different sounds with a single module, rather than having to have multiple modules set up to be different things and triggering at different times. Like that. I'm just jumping in for a last minute addition, and that's that Instruo have made a documentary. They documented their journey, their adventure, their travelling from the wilds of Scotland to Berlin for Superbooth 2023. And they've put that together as an entire movie, which is pretty interesting. I've had a bit of a glimpse at it and it looks fascinating. It's this awesome behind the scenes view of what it is that goes on at Superbooth when us, just as visitors, have no idea of what it is, the planning and the preparation and the journey and what to do when you get there and how they feel about that whole experience. It's a fascinating thing. Instruo hope to be premiering it on YouTube on the 19th of August. So stick that in your diaries and look out for that, because it's a really good watch. And finally, I'd like to let you in on a little project I've been working on. It's called the Molten Modular Synth Library, and it's probably the most exciting thing you've ever seen. Potentially. Who knows? Who knows at the moment? I'm still trying to work out exactly how this is going to function. But here's the idea. It would be awesome if people who don't have all the cash for modular could get some access to it, could get the opportunity to try something out. Or if you're slowly building Eurorack, to get the opportunity to try different modules before perhaps you buy. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, because in my role as a person who reviews and looks at modular and builds kits and stuff, I tend to get sent a load of stuff, which is really nice and I massively appreciate it. But it just means that I end up having a lot of modular that I don't actually use. Similarly with little synthesizers and bits and pieces, I get a lot of stuff in for review that ends up being in a box on a shelf. And that somehow, I've always felt that to be such a terrible, terrible waste. And there has to be a way to get these products these devices, these synthesizers, these little things of awesome control voltage and signal out to more people to try. It has to be a way. I've thought about it along all sorts of different lines. You know, what could I do? Could I set up a little shop in Norwich and people could stop by and take things away and bring them back? But it's just, the enormity of it is too big. But over the last few months, I've been boiling it down and down to what it could actually be, how it could function as a workable idea. Because there are all sorts of problems associated with lending stuff to people. There's people running off with it to the Bahamas, never coming back. You never seeing it again. I mean, that's obviously one issue because this stuff is expensive. The other thing is, how do I get it to people? How do we get it back? How do we organise that? And of course, the underlying thing is, how does it pay for itself? Because my initial thinking was that it should be a charitable, awesome thing that I can just give away because I'm just rolling in cash and opportunities. But sadly, that's not the case. And so it has to pay for itself. That's the only way it's going to work. And if I'm going to devote time to it, then it has to be part of my revenue ultimately. So all of those thoughts sort of flow around this idea of a synthesizer library. And so I've dwelt on it and thought about it and chewed and think about it. And I feel like I've perhaps brought together enough cohesion to present it to you a little bit. I'll present it to it more. This is just a quick flavour, just a quick suggestion. So the way it's going to work, the way it can only work. First of all, it has to be UK based. There's no point trying to send stuff outside the UK. It's just too much trouble. It's not going to be big synthesizers, it's just going to be little synthesizers and modules. It's going to be a subscription service, something you subscribe to, you pay a monthly fee, and that gives you access to a new module every month. How awesome is that? I just want to pause and go, that's flipping phenomenal if that works. But how do we stop people robbing me blind is the question. Well, the answer to that, I think, is to see the library as something that you personally invest in. So what that means is when you join the library, you have to donate a module or synthesizer to the library that then other people can borrow. And that way, there's a bit of you in it. It kind of acts as a security deposit, in some kind of mild way, but also hopefully engages you with the whole idea because it's your stuff that's in there as well. So that, in a nutshell, is the idea. I mean, along with individual modules, you'll also be able to borrow this, which is the Reco-Synth EDU DIY Eurorack system, modular system that we built together. Do you remember? We built it together all over last year. And this, I think, is going to be the loner. So this is the synth that you can borrow in order to try out modular synthesis. It's not the most awesome synth in the world, but it's rough and ready and will give you an idea of how much and how little you can get out of patching a modular synthesizer. So this is going to be available. And lots of other things like the magneto module, all the modules and sequencers and other bits and pieces, not the stuff I'm currently using perhaps, but other bits and pieces. And hopefully, of course, as more people join, it's going to grow and have more and more interesting stuff. I mean, of course, you could just throw in like a 20 quid malt or something, but that's not really the spirit of things, because the whole thing is going to be done personally, more or less face to face, with me. And I'll say, no, that's not good enough. It's not really good enough. Because you need to enter into the spirit of this idea of sharing, of community, of passing modules from each other in a relaxed and groovy, and we're all going to enjoy this kind of way. Because without that, the whole thing just becomes pointless. So that's the idea. If this interests you, then come along to my Patreon. Pop along, and you're going to have to sign up. You're going to have to give me money. It's just the way it's going to work. So there'll be a new tier on my Patreon for a couple of quid where you sign up and express your interest into the library. Now, once the library started, then it's going to be a lot more expensive than that. It's going to be, quite a chunky subscription, but it'll be cheaper than buying modules. And I think it will work out to be pretty affordable overall when compared to buying individual modules and trying to build a modular synthesizer. So we will see. But to start with, I need some volunteers really who will get to start in this idea essentially for nothing, just so that we can test out the program. Must be UK based. That's really the only criteria. And ideally, you have some form of way of being identified as a real person, as opposed to just me sending stuff to some strange address. So there you go. That's the concept. If you're interested, go and check out the Patreon and see what it's all about. And I will talk more about this as it starts to flesh itself out, or I'll tell you that it's all a load of old crap and we just need to go back to leaving modules sitting around not doing anything, which would be a shame. So come on board. Come and see what you think. So there you go. I hope that was interesting. This Sunday we will have our live stream chat about all these bits and pieces, generally chew over what's been going on in our lives, what interesting synthesizer things, and I might have something to play with, something to demonstrate. Otherwise we'll just chat, drink some beer, have a nice time. So that's Sunday night, this Sunday the 30th, 8 o'clock, let's call it. Do look out for the YouTube link though, because sometimes the time does change in order to fit around other people who are doing things on a Sunday evening, but otherwise expect it to be around that sort of time. It will be great. Get together, have a chat. It will be nice, lovely. And of course, bring your questions about the Synth Library and I can talk about that at length, as well as the forthcoming next year's Synth East, other bits and pieces coming up. I've got all sorts of videos on the go. I've finished my big one on the mixer, as you may have seen. That took a lot of time, a lot of thought, a lot of learning into that, but it was well worth it, I think. And SSL are letting me hang on to it for the minute, so that's going to feature in more things, I suspect, and I'm gradually working it into becoming more and more of my workflow. And I'm so serious about it. I even got a deck saver for it. Look at that. It's my first proper deck saver, and it fits up there. Superb. The reason I got this is because there's a little leak somewhere up here I never quite managed to find yet, and every now and again, when it's really, really rainy, I get a dribble somewhere here onto something expensive. So I figured this would be a good idea, as well as things dropping off my shelves, which does tend to happen from time to time. So, but it's a perfect, absolute perfect fit for it. It's the most sensible purchase I've ever made. It's very exciting. Anyway, I think that's enough. That'll do. Lots more videos to come. Awesome things. I've got a lot of building, a lot of DIY, and a lot of modules to review. And I'm going to hope to crack on with a lot of that over the next couple of months. That'd be great in between holidays and the planet being on fire. That sort of stuff. So there we go. In the meantime, go make some tunes.